It was a warm Saturday afternoon in Savannah, Georgia, the kind of afternoon where joy hung in the air like confetti. In the Simmons backyard, pastel blue and white streamers danced in the breeze. R&B classics played softly from a Bluetooth speaker near the cake table, and the smell of barbecue mixed with vanilla cupcakes filled the yard. Guests mingled, children chased balloons, and laughter came in bursts around a tower of diaper cakes and gift bags. At the center of it all stood Jasmine Simmons, 21, glowing in a pale blue sundress that hugged her rounded belly. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright as she snapped photos with relatives and high school friends. Her mother, Cheryl, floated nearby, proud and radiant, greeting guests and refilling lemonade glasses. Jasmine's best friend, Kendra, trailed her with a phone camera, documenting every smile. It was, by all appearances, a celebration of life and love. Then the energy shifted. A man stepped through the gate at the back of the yard. He wore a gray button-down, slacks, and carried a silver gift box tucked neatly under one arm. Some guests glanced up curiously, others barely noticed. But Jasmine did. "Daddy," she called out, a hand waving in surprise. Raymond Simmons, her father, didn't wave back. He moved slowly, eyes scanning the crowd, but not seeing it. He didn't smile, didn't speak. He walked past the buffet table, past the balloons tied to folding chairs, and into the heart of the celebration. The moment lasted seconds. The first shot rang out like a firecracker. People froze. Plates crashed. Someone screamed. The man beside Jasmine, Darius Moore, collapsed, blood soaking into the grass. Then came a second shot. Jasmine gasped and stepped forward. A heartbeat later, she fell, face down, just inches from her baby's shower cake. And just like that, joy turned to horror. Raymond Simmons didn't move as screams tore through the backyard. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He simply lowered the smoking pistol, stepped back, and walked, slowly, deliberately, toward the driveway, where he laid the weapon down on the hood of a parked car. Then he raised his hands and waited. When the first police cruiser skidded into view, sirens still blaring, neighbors were spilling out onto front porches. The celebration had become a crime scene. Officers found Jasmine Simmons face down in the grass, her pale blue dress stained dark. Darius Moore lay nearby, already cold. Paramedics worked frantically over Jasmine's body, but the damage was done. She still had a pulse when they loaded her into the ambulance, but she never made it to the hospital. Her baby, not yet born, never had a chance. Back in the yard, Cheryl stood frozen, trembling, speechless. Witnesses would later say she looked like a woman who'd forgotten how to breathe. Someone tried to guide her to a chair, but she shrugged them off, whispering the same words over and over. Why would he do this? Why her? It was the same question detectives would ask within the hour. Why would a father show up to his own daughter's baby shower with a gun hidden inside a gift box? Why kill her boyfriend first? Why fire again when Jasmine stepped into the path? The early theories painted Raymond as mentally unstable, maybe a jealous ex-husband who couldn't stand the sight of his ex-wife moving on. But those who knew him told a different story. Raymond Simmons had always been quiet, yes, but never cruel. He was the kind of man who opened doors, fixed neighbors' breaks for free, and dropped off soup when someone was sick. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He listened more than he spoke, and when he loved, it was with quiet intensity. He and Cheryl had divorced when Jasmine was 12. It wasn't explosive. There were no screaming matches or police reports, just the slow unraveling of two people who had outgrown each other. Cheryl had wanted more. More money, more admiration, more freedom. Raymond had offered stability, routine, a modest home, and faithful presence. It hadn't been enough. After the split, Cheryl won full custody. Her lawyer painted Raymond as emotionally distant, too buried in work to be a consistent parent. The judge agreed. Visitation rights were granted, but minimal. Raymond never contested. He simply nodded, shook the lawyer's hand, and walked out. But what he lost in court, he tried to make up for in devotion. Every week, without fail, he called Jasmine. He sent postcards from every job site. He drove through snowstorms to watch her school plays, brought her birthday gifts wrapped with too much tape, and spent hours teaching her to braid her own hair in front of the bathroom mirror. To Jasmine, he was still Dad, the one person who never asked her to be different, who never treated her like a problem. They didn't talk every day, but when they did, she smiled like she could finally breathe. And Raymond? He lived for those moments. After the divorce, Cheryl Simmons reinvented herself. She dyed her hair honey blonde, started wearing high heels again, and joined a wine club with women she barely knew. She told people she was finally living. And to a certain extent, she was, just not in the way Raymond understood. She had grown tired of quiet evenings and cautious budgeting. Tired of being someone's wife without ever being someone's priority. And when she met Darius Moore, everything shifted. He walked into her life one Thursday evening at a lounge in downtown Charlotte. He wasn't subtle. Darius wore a gold Rolex, talked like a man who owned every room he entered, and smelled of sandalwood and ambition. He asked for her number within 10 minutes. Within 2 weeks, he was paying her rent. By the end of the month, he had promised her a business, a beauty salon, her name on the lease, her future in his hands. She didn't ask too many questions. Darius said he had a car dealership on the south side. The paperwork was in someone else's name, but the money was real. He carried stacks of cash in his glove compartment and left $100 tips on tables. Cheryl didn't mind the mystery. For the first time in years, someone made her feel wanted, lavishly, publicly, undeniably. That fall, she packed up her things and moved from Savannah to Charlotte with Jasmine, who was 17 at the time. Raymond wasn't informed. He found out through a missed call and a voicemail that simply said, "We're moving for better opportunities." To Jasmine, it wasn't a fresh start. It was an uprooting. The new apartment was sleek but unfamiliar. Gone were the neighbors who knew her name, the park down the street, and the creaky porch swing she used to sit on with her dad. Now there was granite countertops, locked doors, and Darius, always Darius. At first, he was charming. "You're a smart girl," he'd say. "Got your mama's fire." He bought her expensive sneakers and told her she had a grown woman's confidence. Compliments at first, then attention that lingered, then comments that made her skin crawl. Jasmine went to her mother. "Mom," she said, one evening while helping Cheryl fold laundry, "he looks at me weird." Cheryl didn't stop folding. "You're not used to having a man around the house," she said flatly. Raymond was never present. Darius is just protective. That was the end of the conversation. Jasmine didn't bring it up again. She kept her door shut at night. She avoided eye contact. She texted Raymond more often, though she never told him why. Just sent him old photos, updates about school, emojis instead of words. Meanwhile, Cheryl was falling deeper into Darius's orbit. She quit her part-time job and began making Pinterest boards for her future salon. Darius let her use his debit card. He promised to add her name to his life insurance policy. He told her, "Everything I have is yours. Just be patient." And she believed him. She let herself believe that love could be transactional. That loyalty could be measured by what someone gave you, not how they treated your child. She stopped noticing the way Jasmine recoiled when Darius walked into her room. Stopped wondering why her daughter barely ate dinner. Cheryl was too busy daydreaming about salon chairs and marble countertops to see what was happening under her own roof. And Jasmine, she stopped talking. Not because she didn't want to, but because no one was listening. By the time Jasmine turned 18, her world had shrunk to a few rooms and a screen. She spent more and more time in her bedroom, headphones in, staring at nothing. At school, she smiled politely. At home, she avoided Darius's gaze like it was poison. Her phone became her lifeline, short texts to her father, emoji responses to friends, silence to her mother. The first time it happened, she didn't even understand what it was. She'd been home alone with Darius. Cheryl was out meeting with a salon supplier. Jasmine had just finished cleaning the kitchen when Darius stepped in behind her, too close, too quiet. "You've grown," he said, his voice low. "You've really turned into something." He reached forward, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered. Jasmine froze. He didn't push further that day, just smiled, winked, and walked off like nothing had happened. She waited until Cheryl came home. Waited until they were alone in the living room. Jasmine tried to explain, Not in detail, just the feeling. The tension, the way he looked at her. Cheryl barely blinked. "Jasmine," she said, "you need to stop imagining things. You're not a little girl anymore. You're just not used to having a man take care of things." Jasmine stared at her mother, realizing in that moment that there would be no help, no protection, no belief. The second incident wasn't much different. A touch, a comment, a laugh that didn't feel right. Then another, and another. They escalated slowly until they didn't. It wasn't long before it crossed the line entirely. It happened on a couch while Cheryl was taking a nap in the bedroom. Jasmine didn't scream. She didn't even fight. She just froze, her heart pounding, eyes wide open, staring at the TV that was still playing some reality show like nothing was wrong. When it was over, she went into the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the tub for over an hour. She told Cheryl again the next day. Cheryl's face was a blank wall. No anger, no confusion, just tired eyes and a single line. "Don't ruin what we're building." That was the last time Jasmine spoke to her mother about Darius. But Cheryl wasn't the only one who failed her. A few days later, Kendra Banks showed up unannounced. Kendra had been Jasmine's best friend since middle school. The kind of friend you share hoodies with, sneak snacks into movies with, cry to about boys and bad grades. She had moved to Charlotte recently and claimed she was just in the neighborhood. At first, her visits were a relief. Jasmine needed anyone who felt safe. They sat on the floor of her bedroom, painting nails and eating chips like old times. Jasmine let herself open up, just a little. "He makes me feel sick," Jasmine whispered one night. Kendra didn't flinch. "Sometimes older men just see things differently," she said gently. "They notice things other people miss. It's not always bad." Jasmine wanted to believe her. She needed to, but the comments kept coming. Subtle suggestions that maybe Jasmine was just maturing. That maybe attention wasn't the same as abuse. That maybe, just maybe, this was something other girls would envy. What Jasmine didn't know, what no one told her, was that Kendra had been paid to visit. A few $100s, hand-delivered by Cheryl's mother. "Help her adjust," the grandmother had said. "She's being dramatic." Kendra agreed, but she did more than just manipulate Jasmine's feelings. She started sleeping with Darius too. Jasmine found out months later. Not from words, but from a screen. Darius had left his second phone charging on the kitchen counter. A text buzzed. Jasmine glanced out of habit, then froze. It was a selfie. Kendra, in his hoodie, with a caption that read, "You missing this yet?" Her stomach dropped. She scrolled. Message after message. Photos. Plans. Secrets. Her best friend hadn't just betrayed her. She'd sold her out. And Jasmine? She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just deleted every photo of Kendra from her phone and never spoke her name again. After that night, Jasmine changed. She didn't just withdraw. She hardened. The quiet girl who used to hum along with music while brushing her teeth was gone. In her place was someone colder, watchful. She walked through the apartment like a ghost in her own story, carefully navigating each room, each glance, each silence. She never brought up Darius again. Never questioned Kendra's sudden distance. She simply shut down. Her calls with Raymond became shorter. Sometimes, she let them ring without picking up. When she did answer, she'd smile softly and say, "I'm okay, Daddy," even when she wasn't. He heard the difference in her tone, the pause before she answered, the laugh that sounded rehearsed. But he didn't press. He didn't want to push her away. He just said, "I'm here, baby girl." Always. Behind that calm voice, though, Raymond was growing more uneasy with every passing week. Back in Charlotte, Cheryl was still lost in her daydreams. She spoke often about the future salon, the marble floors, the adjustable chairs, the wall of mirrors. Darius kept feeding her promises like candy, that her name would go on the lease, that his adult son had been removed from the life insurance policy, that she'd be listed as the sole beneficiary. Cheryl soaked up every word like scripture. She never once asked where Jasmine was on certain afternoons. She never noticed the pharmacy receipts or the missed meals or the 48 hours her daughter spent curled in bed, barely speaking. Because by the time Jasmine turned 19, she had already been through 2 pregnancies. Both ended the same way, behind closed doors, handled quietly, wrapped in shame and silence. The first time, she didn't even realize what was happening until her symptoms became too obvious to ignore. She was nauseous, tired, and overwhelmed. She hadn't told anyone, not even Kendra, certainly not her mother. When she finally confronted Darius, he didn't flinch. He booked the appointment himself, drove her there, waited in the car while she walked inside alone. He handed her cash afterward, along with a warning. This stays between us. You understand me? She nodded. And Cheryl? She never asked where they had gone. Never asked why her daughter couldn't get out of bed for 2 days. The second pregnancy came the next year. Darius's tone was different this time, more irritated, more controlling. He accused Jasmine of not taking care of herself, of being reckless. Still, he took control of everything again. Booked the clinic, paid in cash, dropped her off, and waited just like before. And again, Cheryl said nothing. Because the promises were closer now. The salon was just around the corner. The life insurance paperwork had been drafted. The illusion of stability was finally within reach, even if it was built on her daughter's silence. Jasmine tried to break away. She asked about getting a job at a nearby cafe. The application disappeared before her interview. She mentioned wanting to take community college classes. Darius told Cheryl it was too soon. When Jasmine brought up moving out, Cheryl shut it down instantly. You don't pay rent, she snapped. You're not ready for that kind of life. It wasn't jail. It wasn't chains. But it was control. Layered. Invisible. Cruel. And Jasmine? She learned to survive inside the prison no one else could see. Until one night, everything changed. And she decided she couldn't stay silent any longer. It was nearly midnight when Raymond Simmons's phone buzzed. He had just gotten home from a long shift at the auto shop. His hands were still stained with grease, his back aching, his dinner cold on the stove. He planned to take a shower, heat up the leftovers, maybe fall asleep watching the news. But the screen lit up with a name that made his heart pause. Jasmine. Not a text this time. A voice note. He stared at the screen for a moment. It was long, over 9 minutes. Jasmine never sent voice notes. She hated how her voice sounded recorded. Usually she texted in quick bursts, doing okay, love you, or just a heart emoji. But this was different. Raymond sat down at the edge of the couch, elbows on knees, and pressed play. What he heard would forever split his life in two. Jasmine's voice came through soft at first, calm, almost flat, but underneath, it trembled like something barely holding together. She started with an apology. I should have told you sooner, Daddy. I didn't know how. Then came the truth. The kind of truth that rewrites everything. She told him about Darius. Not just vague discomfort or strange looks, but explicit, horrifying detail. How it started, when it crossed the line. How she froze the first time it happened. How she tried to tell her mother and was met with indifference. She didn't protect me. She chose him. Raymond gripped the phone tighter. Jasmine went on. She told him about the pregnancies, the abortions, the clinic visits where she went in alone and came out changed. She spoke about how Darius controlled everything. Where she went, who she saw, what she was allowed to dream of. Then, her voice cracked just once. I got tired, Daddy. Not sad, not scared, just tired. Tired of pretending nothing happened. She told him about Kendra, her best friend, her sister in spirit. How she had turned out to be part of it. How she had manipulated her, encouraged her to see abuse as attention. And how Jasmine later discovered that Kendra had been sleeping with Darius too. She sold me out, Daddy. For money. For him. The silence between Jasmine's words felt like thunder. But Jasmine wasn't looking for help. That was the most devastating part. She wasn't calling for rescue or pleading for intervention. She was leaving a record. If something happens to me, she said, her voice slow and deliberate, just know it wasn't random. It was never random. Then the audio ended. No goodbye. No, I love you. Just silence. Raymond sat there for several minutes, phone still in his hand, unable to move. His heart was racing, his jaw clenched, his eyes stinging. The girl he had loved more than anything, the girl he swore to protect even after the courts took her away, had been crying for help all along. And no one had heard her. Not until now. He didn't call her back. He didn't text. Instead, Raymond stood up, walked to his bedroom, and opened the drawer beneath his bed. Inside was a case he hadn't touched in over a decade. A 9mm pistol, a gift from his late brother. Legal. Registered. Locked away. He unlocked the case, removed the gun, checked the magazine, loaded it. Then he placed it aside and sat back down, thinking, breathing, not crying. He didn't sleep that night. He didn't even close his eyes. The next morning, he drove to a small hardware store on the edge of town. Surveillance footage would later show him at the register, paying in cash for a plain silver gift box, tissue paper, and a roll of blue ribbon. There was no note, no manifesto, no threats posted online. Just a man, heartbroken and haunted, making a silent decision. He knew the date of the baby shower. Jasmine had mentioned it weeks earlier, in passing, assuming he wouldn't come. And until that night, he hadn't planned to. But now, he knew he had to be there, not as a guest, not as a father, but as something else. The only person left who could do what no one else had the courage to do. Answer her voice with action. The morning of the baby shower arrived bright and cloudless, as if the sky itself had no idea what was coming. The Simmons backyard was a scene straight out of a magazine. White folding chairs lined the freshly mowed grass. Blue balloons bobbed lazily in the breeze. A table was stacked with pastel-colored gifts and plates of lemon bars, deviled eggs, and barbecue sliders. A speaker played soft music, Luther Vandross, then Anita Baker, then a mashup of 90s R&B. Laughter floated through the air like it belonged there. Cheryl, glowing in a fitted white jumpsuit, moved from guest to guest like the hostess of the year. She held court near the drink station, bragging about the salon lease that was basically finalized, pointing at her boyfriend with pride. Darius Moore, in his designer shades and polished shoes, stood beside Jasmine, hand on her back, smiling like he belonged to the picture-perfect family. And Jasmine, she stood in the middle of it all, pretty, pregnant, and painfully quiet. She smiled when cameras turned on her. She hugged her aunts and posed with Kendra by the cake. But anyone paying close attention could see it. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Her laugh was hollow. Her hands trembled slightly every time Darius leaned in too close. Then Raymond walked in. No one noticed at first. He entered through the side gate, silver gift box in hand, dressed in a crisp gray button-down and slacks. His expression was unreadable, calm, composed, focused. Guests turned and whispered. Some recognized him immediately. Others asked, "Who's that?" Jasmine saw him. Her eyes lit up. "Daddy," she called out, raising a hand. Raymond didn't respond. He kept walking, past the folding chairs, past the gift table, past Cheryl's frozen stare, until he reached the center of the yard. The box dropped from his hand, and then came the first shot. The sound cracked like thunder in a cloudless sky. Darius collapsed, blood pooling beneath his chest. Screams erupted. Plates crashed. Someone yelled, "Get down!" Jasmine gasped and stepped forward, instinctively reaching for her father. Then came a second shot. She dropped instantly, face down, beside her baby shower cake, blue frosting smearing the grass around her. Panic exploded. Guests ran in all directions. A child screamed for his mother. Balloons popped beneath fleeing feet. Cheryl screamed, but too late, too far. Kendra dove behind a table, sobbing uncontrollably. Raymond didn't run. He walked calmly to the driveway, placed the gun on the hood of a parked car, and raised his hands, waiting, not for applause, but for the consequences. By the time the first police car screeched into view, the baby shower had already become a battlefield of disbelief. Streamers fluttered in the wind, ripped and tangled. A folding chair lay overturned beside a tray of crushed cupcakes. The music had stopped, but the chaos echoed in every corner of the yard. Sobs, shouts, and the stunned silence of people still trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Paramedics rushed in. Darius Moore was declared dead at the scene. 1 bullet, center chest. No signs of life. Jasmine Simmons, still warm, was loaded into an ambulance with 2 medics working furiously to stabilize her. Her pulse was faint, her breathing shallow. A balloon floated above the gurney as they wheeled her away, swaying as if completely unaware of the devastation below. She didn't make it to the hospital. Neither did her baby. Back at the house, Raymond Simmons stood silently as officers handcuffed him. He offered no resistance, no explanation. He didn't even look at Cheryl, who stood trembling just feet away, mascara streaking down her cheeks. She wasn't crying. She was shaking, whispering, "Why would he do this? Why would he? Why her?" It was the same question detectives would ask him later at the station. But Raymond said nothing. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't beg for understanding. He simply sat in the interview room, silent, hollow-eyed, as if the part of him that mattered had already died. While police began to tape off the scene, guests were escorted inside for questioning. Statements blurred together. Some said they saw Raymond walk in without blinking. Some said they thought the silver box held baby clothes. One woman thought it was a speaker. Another thought it was champagne. But one detail was unanimous. He never said a single word. Later that day, investigators retrieved the gift box from where it had fallen. Inside, buried beneath shredded tissue paper, they found traces of gunpowder, ribbon fragments, and a smear of blood. The weapon, a registered 9mm pistol, matched the bullets recovered from both victims. The remaining rounds in the magazine were unused but loaded. Detectives began combing through the lives left behind. Jasmine's phone was examined. Her voice note, time-stamped just hours before the shooting, became the centerpiece of the investigation. It wasn't just emotional testimony. It was evidence. A confession of abuse, a timeline of manipulation, and a roadmap to betrayal. She had named everyone, Darius, Cheryl, Kendra, and explained the role they each played in her silence. Her voice shook in parts, but never wavered in truth. It was enough to crack everything wide open. Within 48 hours, Kendra Banks was brought in for questioning. At first, she denied everything, said she had no idea what Jasmine had been going through. But when detectives confronted her with Jasmine's deleted screenshots, recovered from backups, she broke. She admitted to the affair with Darius. She confessed to taking cash from Cheryl's mother, a modest amount, under $1,000, to help Jasmine adjust to the new household. Her role was to ease Jasmine into compliance, to reframe the abuse as admiration, attention, maybe even love. "Did you believe it wasn't wrong?" a detective asked her. Kendra sobbed. "I didn't think it would end like this," she whispered. In exchange for her cooperation, Kendra was offered a plea deal. She handed over her phone, filled with text threads, calendar invites, and explicit photos confirming her relationship with Darius. The prosecution categorized her as a secondary accomplice, a manipulated participant who became complicit by greed and ignorance. Her sentence? 5 years probation, community supervision, and mandatory counseling. Meanwhile, Cheryl Simmons was still pretending she knew nothing. At first, she played the grieving mother. She stood outside the courthouse with sunglasses on, speaking softly about the tragedy. She claimed she had no idea her daughter had been hurting, but the evidence said otherwise. Phone records showed her in constant communication with Darius, often during Jasmine's clinic appointments. Bank statements revealed new deposits from Darius into an account opened in her name. On the same weeks Jasmine had tried applying for independent housing. Even more damning, life insurance documents, listing Cheryl as the primary beneficiary. Salon lease agreements. Handwritten notes mapping out future ownership percentages. It wasn't a fantasy. It was a business arrangement. And Jasmine was the collateral. 2 weeks after Jasmine's funeral, a quiet Thursday morning marked by gray skies and silence, Cheryl Simmons was arrested outside a nail salon. She didn't fight, didn't scream, just clutched her purse a little tighter when the cuffs clicked shut. Cameras weren't rolling. Reporters weren't there. But the moment still felt historic. A mother taken in not for what she did, but for what she refused to stop. The charges were clear: criminal conspiracy, endangering the welfare of a dependent adult, and failure to protect. She hadn't pulled the trigger, but she had loaded the silence that let the bullets fly. At her arraignment, she pleaded not guilty. Her lawyer called her a victim of manipulation, a woman misled by a charismatic man. unaware of what was happening under her own roof. But the jury didn't buy it. Not after they heard Jasmine's voice note. In the courtroom, that recording echoed like thunder. Jasmine's voice, young, weary, raw, cut through every legal strategy. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She simply told the truth. She knew. She always knew. And she chose not to see me. The jurors wept. So did the bailiff. So did one of the clerks. It took less than 4 hours to return a verdict. Guilty on all counts. The judge looked at Cheryl long and hard before delivering the sentence. You didn't shoot your daughter, he said, but you watched her rot in a house you built around her, and you called it love. 12 years in prison. No possibility of early release. Kendra's sentence had already been handed down, lighter, but not forgotten. Community service, therapy, and a name forever stained in court records. And Raymond? His case was different. He didn't hire a high-powered defense attorney. He didn't deny what he did. His legal team submitted Jasmine's voice note as part of the record, not as a defense, but as context. A father pushed past the edge of grief into something irreversible. He pled guilty to 1 count of second-degree murder. Before sentencing, he stood and addressed the court. His voice didn't shake. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just didn't want to bury my daughter with secrets. The judge acknowledged the emotional complexity, but justice, he said, couldn't be carried out with a loaded gun, no matter how noble the grief. 22 years in prison. Parole eligibility after 15. Raymond nodded once. He didn't appeal. He only asked for one thing. That Jasmine's voice note be entered into public record. So no one could ever say she didn't try to speak. So no one could ever say she wasn't heard. The day they buried Jasmine Simmons, the sky hung low with thick clouds, like it knew better than to offer sunshine. Her casket was small and white, trimmed in soft blue satin. A single teddy bear rested near the top, just above where her baby would have lain. Dozens of guests gathered in silence, some holding hands, others unable to speak. No one dared to play music. No one cracked a nervous joke. They stood there, shoulders hunched, eyes wet, wrapped in the bitter understanding that this wasn't just a funeral. It was an apology too late. Raymond wasn't there. He was already behind bars, his world now metal and concrete. But flowers sent in his name were tucked gently beneath the spray that adorned her casket. A card was attached, handwritten in his familiar, slanted script. You told the truth, baby girl. I'm sorry I didn't get there sooner. Cheryl, now stripped of her title as mother in the minds of many, was still in holding. She hadn't asked to attend the funeral. No one offered. But Jasmine's voice was there. In the weeks following her death, her voice note was played in full at a community forum on domestic abuse. Then again at a school assembly. And then again on a local radio show. Each time it aired, silence followed. Long, heavy silence. Listeners didn't just hear her pain. They heard their own daughters, their sisters, their students. She wasn't just another statistic. She was a reminder that silence kills more than words ever will. In the aftermath, the story gained traction. Advocacy groups picked it up. Her case became a touchstone for legislative proposals on coercive control, child protection loopholes, and psychological abuse recognition in family court systems. Her name, Jasmine Simmons, was printed on petitions, discussed in town halls, and spoken in rooms where change is born. But behind the headlines, in the quiet corners of Savannah and Charlotte, her memory lived differently. In the school she once attended, a counselor hung her photo in the hallway with a caption that read, "If she had been believed, she might still be here." In Raymond's prison cell, Jasmine's childhood drawing, crayon flowers and crooked letters spelling Daddy's Girl, was taped above his bunk. He looked at it every morning, every night. He never denied what he did, but he also never let anyone forget why. He wrote letters from prison, not to beg forgiveness, but to share her story. He sent them to community centers, women's shelters, churches, letters sealed with lines like, "She didn't die in silence. She left us her voice. Don't waste it." Even Kendra, broken and forever marked by what she chose to ignore, began volunteering with a local trauma support group. Her apology, once hollow, began taking shape in hours spent listening to other girls who felt what Jasmine had felt. Confused, manipulated, invisible. Time moved forward, as it always does. But every July, on the anniversary of the baby shower, blue and white balloons appear in a certain neighborhood park. No names, no photos, just quiet colors dancing in the breeze, like a whisper from someone brave enough to finally speak. And if you listen closely on that day, you'll hear people say her name, not in anger, not in pity, but in memory. Jasmine Simmons, the girl who told the truth, the girl who should still be here. Years passed, but Jasmine's story never faded. Not really. Not in the way tragedies usually vanish behind new headlines and newer heartbreaks. Her name lingered like a melody people couldn't stop humming. Quietly, reverently, with the weight it deserved. In 2029, the Jasmine Simmons Foundation was formed by a coalition of survivors, counselors, and a retired teacher who had once taught Jasmine literature in 10th grade. Its mission was simple but bold, to give girls a voice before silence becomes survival. They offered trauma counseling, legal aid, housing support, and most importantly, belief. At the heart of their outreach program was Jasmine's voice note. They didn't edit it. They didn't dramatize it. They played it just as she recorded it, trembling, honest, raw. It became the organization's most powerful tool. It reminded young women that it's not just okay to speak, but necessary. That their pain wasn't too small. That their intuition wasn't overreacting. That someone, somewhere would listen. Raymond, still serving time, was eventually granted access to audio from one of the Foundation's events. A staff member mailed it to him with a handwritten note. "She's saving lives, Mr. Simmons. She's still speaking." He listened alone in the prison library, the headphones pressed tightly over his ears, tears slipping silently onto the open pages of a book he no longer cared to read. Even Cheryl, nearing the end of her sentence, was no longer untouched by consequence. She received no visitors, no cards, no calls. In her quietest hours, she began to write letters, unsent, unopened, addressed to a daughter buried beneath blue flowers and shame. Whether she wrote from guilt or awakening didn't matter. The truth had already chosen its side. Kendra, years into her counseling work, never forgave herself. But she no longer tried to. She just showed up every day to sit with girls who whispered the kinds of secrets Jasmine had once buried. And when they cried, she didn't say, "You'll be okay." She said, "I believe you." And maybe that was enough. Because Jasmine's life, though tragically short, didn't vanish. It echoed through courtrooms and classrooms, through prison walls and policy reform, through every girl who now speaks sooner. She may have died in silence, but she left behind a voice loud enough to change everything. And if you ever find yourself in Savannah on a quiet July afternoon, you might see them, blue and white balloons rising gently into the sky. They don't carry names, but you'll know who they're for, because some stories don't end. They become warnings. They become promises. They become legacy. Her name was Jasmine, and she still matters. In prison, Raymond Simmons lived simply. He kept to himself, didn't join cliques, didn't play cards or watch endless reruns on the dayroom TV. Instead, he read biographies mostly, wrote letters, walked the yard quietly, alone, always with his hands behind his back like he was still thinking through the day Jasmine sent him that voice note. He didn't talk about what he did. He didn't have to. The other inmates knew. Some avoided him. Some nodded in respect. A few, whose own daughters had cut them off long ago, asked to hear Jasmine's recording. Raymond never said no. He'd sit at the table with trembling hands as they listened, watching their faces shift from disbelief to heartbreak to rage. Every time it ended, the room fell quiet. Every single time. "Your girl was brave," one man said once. "My daughter," she stopped calling. "I just thought she was being difficult." Raymond didn't reply. Because what could he say? That he knew what it felt like to miss a warning hidden in a sigh? To lose a child not once, but slowly, over time. First her laughter, then her voice, then her light. So he listened now. He listened for those little silences others might miss. The ones that sound like nothing until it's too late. He became known for it. Raymond Simmons, the quiet guy who listens. He spoke at prison therapy groups when asked, not about what he did, but about what he heard. The crack in his daughter's voice. The weight of the word tired. The final sentence she left him with, echoing like gospel through every cell in his body. If something happens to me, just know it wasn't random. In year 7 of his sentence, he received a letter. It was from a 16-year-old girl in Atlanta. She'd heard Jasmine's voice note in school. It had made her tell someone, a guidance counselor, then the police. Her stepfather was arrested 2 weeks later. At the bottom of the letter, the girl had written, I don't know what your daughter would think of me, but I think she saved my life. Raymond folded the letter with both hands, held it to his chest, and let the tears come without apology. Because Jasmine hadn't just spoken the truth. She had handed the world a mirror. And somehow, through all the pain, someone had looked into it and seen their own reflection and survived. That, to Raymond, was justice. Not revenge. Not even peace. Just a small, sacred proof that his daughter's voice hadn't been lost. It had only begun. Back in Savannah, the house where Jasmine grew up still stood. A modest one-story home with faded shutters and a porch swing that creaked in the wind. It had been empty for years. Grass grew long in the yard. Paint peeled from the trim. But the mailbox still had her father's name on it. Inside, everything was still. The furniture had been covered in white sheets, but Jasmine's room, that small corner of the world where she once dreamed out loud, had remained untouched. The walls were pale lavender. Stickers from her teenage years still clung to the mirror, some curled at the edges. Her bookshelf held old journals, dog-eared novels, and a half-filled sketchpad. On her nightstand sat the last birthday card her father gave her, a pop-up carousel with a tiny handwritten message. You light up every room you walk into. Always, Dad. It hadn't been opened in years. Until now. One afternoon, a woman unlocked the front door with cautious hands. She was in her mid-40s, wearing jeans and a simple gray sweater. Her name was Lena Tate, a survivor of abuse who now worked with the Jasmine Simmons Foundation. She hadn't known Jasmine personally, but she knew her story like scripture. Lena had been the one to collect Raymond's letters, to transcribe them for outreach programs, to carry his words into rooms he'd never see. She had spoken at schools, at churches, at women's shelters. And every time, she ended her talk with the same line. Her story started in a house just like yours. And it didn't have to end that way. That day, she stood in Jasmine's bedroom with a quiet reverence. She opened the window, let the breeze roll in. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. Instead, she walked to the center of the room, reached into her bag, and placed something gently on Jasmine's old dresser. A frame. Inside, it was a single printed quote in bold letters. I spoke, and someone finally listened. Beneath the quote was Jasmine's name, and the date her voice note was first played publicly. Lena stood there for a long moment, then whispered softly, You're still here, baby. We all hear you now. She closed the door behind her, locking it not in finality, but in preservation. Because Jasmine's room wasn't a shrine. It was a beginning, a reminder that even the smallest voices, when finally believed, could shake the world.